أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة لأهل التقوى واليقين ثم الصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين حبيب إله العالمين العبد المؤيد الرسول المسدد المصطفى الأمجد المحمود الأحمد أبي القاسم مصطفى محمد صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم. أما بعد فقد قال الحكيم في كتابه الكريم فاسألوا أهل الذكر إن كنتم لا تعلمون. Dear brothers and sisters, we have been discussing the rules regarding Taqlid, and this is the third session, the third lecture I am giving in regards to Taqlid, the rules and issues of Taqlid. Of course, there are some questions and some issues left concerning Taqlid which we will discuss in this session. There are questions coming to the offices of some grand jurists and religious authorities asking whether it is whether their actions or religious acts of worship are valid in case they have not been following a marja, they have not been following a mujtahid, nor have they been acting on precaution. So now let me put this question in this manner. Is your action valid if you do not follow a marja, or if you did not know that it was necessary for you to follow a certain marja? Now you want to know whether your actions in the past have been valid or not, whether they are correct or not. This is a question, and this is a concern for many people. Many people try to know whether their actions which they have been doing are valid or not. The answer is this, that if your actions have been in accordance with the verdicts of the most learned jurist, then they are valid. Or if the mujtahid whom you are following now says that those actions are valid and correct, then those actions are valid. It's not necessary or obligatory to repeat those actions because they are exactly in accordance with the rules and fatwas or the opinion of the most learned jurisprudence. Now, another question that is raised in connection with the issue of Taqlid is this, that is it permissible for a woman to become a mujtahid? Now there are some women in the Islamic seminaries of Qom who have actually attained the degree of ijtihad, who have reached the rank of ijtihad, and who are capable of inferring and deducing Islamic laws. Is it permissible for them in the first place to act according to their own opinion? And then is it permissible for another woman or for men to follow them and to act according to their opinion? The answer is this, that it is not permissible for those women who have attained the rank of ijtihad to act according to the fatwa of a mujtahid, of another mujtahid, of course. They have to act according to their own opinion, according to their own insight, and according to their own opinion. As far as Taqlid is concerned, other people cannot do Taqlid of women. It's not permissible, according to all jurists, according to all scholars, for a person to follow a female mujtahid, no matter what her rank and her status and her position and the area of jurisprudence may be. And there is another question regarding the issue of Taqlid. If you have been following a mujtahid, for example, some people have been following Grand Ayatollah Khoui, and now the said Ayatollah is no longer alive, he has passed away, his followers are following a living mujtahid. Some are following, let's say, Ayatollah Sistani, and some others are following the supreme leader, and some are following other jurists. Now, can they turn back to the former mujtahid, to the mujtahid whom they were following, and who is no longer alive, given the fact that they are presently following a living mujtahid? Can they now get back to the first mujtahid or not? This is a question. The answer is this: once you start following a living mujtahid, then it's not permissible for you to get back to a dead mujtahid. It is not permissible for you to start following a dead mujtahid once again. So you must remain in taqlid of the living mujtahid, especially those issues on which you have acted upon. You have, for example, acted upon upon a number of issues in accordance with the rulings and edicts of a living mujtahid. Now, as far as those rulings and those edicts are concerned, you cannot go back to a deceased mujtahid whom you were following in the beginning. I have always said to my friends, and also, and I'm going to tell you, dear brothers and sisters, that it is not permissible for a follower to change his taqlid unnecessarily. One cannot change his taqlid arbitrarily. There is a criteria for changing your taqlid. If you want to change your taqlid from one mujtahid to another mujtahid, you must make sure that the second mujtahid to whom you are going to shift your taqlid is, of course, the most educated, the most learned, and the most qualified mujtahid. You cannot shift from the most learned mujtahid to a less learned mujtahid or to a less knowledgeable mujtahid. The reason, as I mentioned, is that a person who is less qualified and who is less learned is more likely to commit mistakes, to commit errors, and to commit, mistakes and the rulings which he issues. Now, there is another question. I am, for example, living away from the mujtahid whom I am following. I don't have access to the mujtahid. How do I know that his verdicts have changed? And if his verdicts have changed, how do I know? And what is my obligation, my duty as a follower? The answer is this, that you will remain following him and acting according to his verdicts. And insofar as you are not sure or as you have not got the new verdict, you'll keep following according to the former verdict according to the previous verdict, insofar as you have not got knowledge or insight regarding the new fatwa. Once you come to know the new fatwa, then it is obligatory on you to act according to the new verdict and according to the new edict. The actions which you have performed and the deeds which you have performed in the past are valid. Now there are some people who narrate the verdicts of some mujtahid, or the mujtahid, the most qualified mujtahid, to other people. Of course, if they come to know that the mujtahid's edicts and fatwas have changed, it's not necessary for that person to inform other people about the change. He is not supposed to inform them or to tell them that the fatwa has changed. But of course, if he has wrongly narrated the fatwa and given the fatwa in a manner which is not the fatwa of the most learned mujtahid, then it is necessary for him to correct his mistake. It is necessary for him to inform those people whom he has given the fatwa about the correct verdict, about the correct edict. It is necessary to tell them to correct their mistakes. There are, of course, some other questions regarding Taqlid, and there are some important questions regarding some of the technical terms which we use. And of course, it's necessary for us to understand those technical terms, and until we do not understand those technical terms, those special words, I think it is very difficult for us to understand the whole issues, the whole jurisprudential laws. For example, dear brothers and sisters, we use the word ihtiyat, we use the word wajib, haram, makruh, and sometimes we use ihtiyat wujubi, sometimes we use the word ihtiyat istihbabi. These are some terms which we need to understand before starting and before practicing the religious laws. Now, one by one, I will start explaining these terms and these special words that I may be using in the process of telling and explaining the fatwa. Now, the first word, of course, that is very easy to understand, and of course most of you, 90% of the people do understand, is the word wajib. Every Muslim, I think, every Muslim man and woman understand the word wajib. Sometimes they use the term fard and sometimes they use the term wajib. These two terms have the same meaning and give the same meaning in Shia jurisprudence, of course, not in Sunni jurisprudence, because in Sunni jurisprudence, the word farz and wajib have two different implications and two different meanings. When it comes to Shia jurisprudence, the word farz and the word wajib are synonyms. They give the same meaning, and of course the meaning, the English meaning which we give is either sometimes we use the word obligatory, sometimes we use the word necessary, and sometimes we use the word mandatory or essential. And also we use the word necessary to to give the meaning for the word wajib and farz. I should tell you once again that the word farz and wajib give the same meaning. They are synonyms in Shia jurisprudence and Shia Islamic law, not in a Sunni perspective. A wajib act as an act that must be performed. It is incumbent to perform it. If you perform it, God will reward you. God will give you the reward, the sawab. But if you neglect it, if you do not perform it, God will punish you for neglecting it. This is the definition of wajib. As far as haram is concerned, haram is quite the opposite of wajib. Haram is an act which one must not do. It is an act which one must stay away and which is necessary to be abandoned. Haram is an act which, if done, will earn punishment for the doer. Therefore, the term haram means prohibited, means forbidden. One should not do it, and if a person does it, he will be punished in the hereafter. Now there is another term which we normally use, and that is sunnah or mustahab. When something is sunnah or mustahab, it means it is recommended. It is preferable. It is better to be done. And if something is recommended, it is, of course, a hukum. It should be done. But if a person does not do it, he will not be punished. If he does it, he will get the reward, he will get the sawab. For example, offering nafila, the anfal prayers, or the night prayer is recommended. It is mustahab. It is better to do it, and it is very much recommended to do the night prayers. If you do them, you will get a spiritual upliftment. You will get the spiritual reward. But if you fail to do them, if you fail to do the mustahab prayers, then of course you will be deprived of the sawab, but you will not be punished. The word sunnah and the word mustahab, of course, gives the same meaning. They refer to acts that are recommended to be done, that are preferable to be done, or that are preferred to be done. And another word is the word makruh. Makruh is also a clear term, it's understandable, and of course makruh means abominable. It means disliked. It means reprehensible. And it means undesirable. When the interpreters or translators translate the word makruh, they either use the word reprehensible, they use the word abominable, they use the word disliked, and they use the word undesirable. What is a makruh act? A makruh act is that it is better not to do it. It's better to avoid it. It is better to stay away from a makruh act. If you do it, you will not be punished for it. For example, eating hot food is makruh, or blowing on a hot food is makruh. If you blow with your mouth on hot food to make it cool, of course, you will not be punished for doing so. You will not be scolded or rebuked for doing a makruh act. But of course, if you keep away from doing makruh act, from doing abominable and disliked acts, you will be rewarded for the obedience, for complying the order of your master. And there's another term which we use, and that is the word mubah, the word jaiz, and the word halal. Of course, there are some negligible differences between these terms, for example, jaiz and mubah. Sometimes they are used interchangeably, but sometimes they are not used. We have to know the difference between jaiz and between mubah. And generally speaking, or in general terms, when we want to explain the word jaiz, mubah, and halal, they mean allowable, they mean permissible. The word halal, when you go to the treatises of scholars and the epistles of Islamic laws that have been translated by capable translators, of course, the word mubah has been translated as allowable or permissible, and the word jaiz has also been translated as permitted or permissible or allowed. Halal is also, we don't have a very, very good synonym or a good word for the word halal, but of course halal has different meanings, and one of the meanings which we mean here is that halal is permissible. For example, wearing black dress is halal. Of course it's makruh also, but it's halal. Or eating hot food is halal, but it is makruh also. Something can be halal and it can be makruh at the same time. Something can be jaiz, permissible, and it can be halal at the same time. Something can be halal, mubah, and it can be halal at the same time. And of course, in a Western context or in a jurisprudential context sometimes, of course, when we use the term mubah, halal, we refer to the meat of an animal that has been slaughtered according to Islamic law. If a sheep has been slaughtered according to the rules of according to Islamic rules and according to Islamic law, and in Islamic manner, the meat of that animal is halal. Now halal in that sense, and in this very sense, has a different meaning. When the term jaiz, halal, and mubah are used, they should not be confusing for you. They should not be difficult for you to understand. They refer to the same thing, and they generally mean permissible. They generally mean allowable and permitted. There is no other meaning for these three terms. An action or a deed or a religious act which is mubah or jaiz or halal does not earn you a reward, nor does it earn you a punishment. If you neglect it, you will not be punished. If you do it, you will not receive a reward. Now, for example, wearing a turban, in a general sense, speaking in a general way, is mubah. Many people in many Muslim countries wear turban as a traditional practice. It's a mubah act. It is an act which is permissible by itself. Now, if you don't wear the turban, or if you wear it, if you wear a cap or if you don't wear it, it does not make any difference. You will not receive reward, nor will you be given punishment for doing it. Now, there is another term in Islamic jurisprudence, which is ihtiyat. What does ihtiyat mean in a jurisprudential context? Ihtiyat means precaution, something which is prudent and which is precautionary is called ihtiyat. We have two kinds of ihtiyat. One is obligatory ihtiyat, which is called ihtiyat wajib, and the other is recommended ihtiyat, which is termed as recommended precaution. Ihtiyat mustahab, recommended precaution. There is a difference between recommended precaution and obligatory precaution. When it comes to recommended precaution, of course, you are allowed to neglect it. You are allowed not to observe a recommended precaution. It is not necessary to act according to a recommended precaution because it's recommended. It is desirable in nature. But when it comes to an obligatory precaution, a jurisprudence says, for example, French cut beard is not sufficient على الأحوة وجوبا as an obligatory precaution or as a measure of obligatory precaution. What does this mean? This means that it is necessary, it is to act according to this precaution. This precaution is necessary. But this is not a fatwa. It is not an explicit verdict. It is not an explicit edict. You are not, of course, supposed to act according to, against this precaution. Of course, when it comes to obligatory precaution, you are free to act according to this precaution or follow the fatwa of another mujtahid who is supposed to be the next most learned mujtahid. In matters of ihtiyat, whenever your mujtahid has a fatwa which has an opinion, and his opinion is based on precaution, you are allowed and you have the right to turn to another mujtahid who has a fatwa, an explicit fatwa in that regard. Now, I give you an example. If a certain mujtahid says that reciting a complete surah after hamd in prayer is necessary as an obligatory precaution. Now, this is not an explicit fatwa. This is a simple precaution, but it is an obligatory precaution. You are allowed to turn to another mujtahid and who is the next most learned, the next most knowledgeable mujtahid who does not believe in precaution and whose fatwa is not based on precaution but whose opinion is a straightforward fatwa, an explicit fatwa. He says, for example, that it is permissible to avoid reciting the surah after hamd, in which case it is permissible for you to turn to that mujtahid in order to act according to his fatwa. But if the next most learned mujtahid is also observing precaution, you cannot follow him. You cannot turn to him for taqlid in that respect. You must remain in taqlid of the said mujtahid. Now, dear brothers and sisters, whenever a mujtahid has a fatwa, an explicit fatwa, that fatwa remains valid for the follower. He cannot change it. He cannot deviate from that fatwa. He cannot do an act against that fatwa. There is one more question when it comes to ihtiyat. What is the difference between an obligatory fatwa or between an ihtiyat which is considered to be obligatory? Now there are two suppositions. Once a mujtahid says that it is a person has to do or his followers should do a certain act according to as an obligatory precaution, but sometimes he says no, that this precaution is obligatory. If he says this, if he says the second, if he says that this precaution is obligatory, then this is a fatwa. He says the precaution is obligatory. When he says it's obligatory, then this is fatwa. But when he says that a person should do this and that as a measure of obligatory precaution, this is not a fatwa. This is simply a precaution. Inshallah, in the next session to come, we will discuss the rules of taharat, purity and impurity, which is one of the main concerns of families, and especially the certain mu'minin, especially women, who are very much worried about the issue of taharat, purity and impurity, and especially those people who are living in the West and who are living in non-Muslim countries. They are very much concerned about how to deal with non-Muslims or how to deal with issues regarding purity and impurity. Inshallah, we will deal with those issues in the next session. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.